we talk about strength training a lot with falls prevention. Strength training is a great proxy, but actually probably the better measure is power training. So producing force quickly, because falls don't happen in 5 seconds. They happen in under a second. And if you trip, you need to catch yourself quickly and produce that force quickly. So actually, yes, strength is great because, as we talked before, strength underpins the power. But if we're just always doing slow and heavy lifting, which I love, but if we're only doing that, we're missing out on the benefit of that power.
Welcome to Personalized by VitaminLab, the show where we dive deep into the world of personalization in healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. David Duizer. Please remember that the following discussion is for educational purposes only, and it's not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Speak with your healthcare practitioner first before integrating anything that you learned today. Join us as we explore the remarkable stories, breakthroughs, and possibilities that come with the pursuit of personalized healthcare. Welcome back to Personalized by VitaminLab. I'm your host, Dr. David Duizer, and today on the show, I'm speaking with Marcel Wallace, a physiotherapist who's redefining what rehabilitation can look like when you combine evidence-based practice with cutting-edge technology. After earning his master's in physiotherapy from Brunel University in the UK in 2018, Marcel made his way to Canada in 2020, bringing with him a unique perspective shaped by his background in strength coaching and his own experience as an Olympic weightlifter. He's not just treating injuries, he's committed to taking his patients from recovery all the way to peak performance, whether that's getting back to everyday activities or excelling in competitive sport. As co-founder of Forza Physiotherapy, a physio-led multidisciplinary clinic right here in Vancouver, Marcel has created a space where hands-on treatment meets objective measurement. What really sets his approach apart is his use of force plate technology, sophisticated equipment that reveals biomechanical patterns and asymmetries that would otherwise remain hidden. This data-driven approach allows him to customize rehabilitation and training programs with remarkable precision, addressing needs that traditional assessments might miss. In our conversation today, we dive deep into how objective physical measurements are transforming patient care, why data matters in rehabilitation, and how Marcel bridges the gap between injury recovery and athletic performance. If you've ever wondered what your body's really doing during movement and how technology can unlock your physical potential, this conversation is for you. Please enjoy our episode with Marcel Wallace. Welcome back to Personalized by VitaminLab. I'm your host, Dr. David Duizer, and today I'm here with Marcel Wallace. How are you doing today, Marcel?
Doing well, thank you, David.
It's so good to chat with you. We've been working together for a while now. I'm really interested in everything that you do, but I'm especially interested in the objective data that you collect, and I wanted to have you on the show because I think it's really cool and it complements a lot of the things I do, so I have that kind of personal, interest in what you're up to. But what I'd love to hear about, and we'll get into all the details of your practice, but I'd love to hear how you got to, how your journey took you to become a physiotherapist who uses force plates, works with athletes, and has this type of objective data kind of personalization approach in your practice. Tell us a little bit about your journey to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, thanks for having me on, David. And likewise, it's always fun to come and talk with fellow professionals. And yeah, we have a lot of interests both kind of in our own clinical areas, and it's kind of cool to nerd out about it. So it's nice to have a chat. Yeah, just to kind of keep it fairly brief. Partly, I have an interest in strength training on a personal level. It's something that I do. I've done it for the last 10 plus years. Kind of more focused in Olympic lifting, which does have a bit more of a power sort of speed base to it. And so that's something that's kind of always caught my attention. And then as a physiotherapist, again, last 8-7 years or so, implementing strength training where appropriate for different patients, which often, depending on what scale of the spectrum, whether they're more athletic, goals wise, or even sort of functional life goals, we can implement strength training there. And so then kind of coming towards the need or the desire to use objective data was, really twofold. One, to prove to myself and partly to my patients that what we're doing is working, that the interventions I'm putting in place are having the desired effect. And then secondly, especially more so now that we've been using it for a while, is actually allowing that to guide some of our decision making. Not entirely, not to sort of dictate what we do, but perhaps when we're making a decision, do we sort of pivot in this direction, or do we take this data and use that to work more towards this? And so yeah, it's just been a really good additional element to almost sort of proof check what we're doing.
Right. Love it. I was going through my old notes this weekend, or last weekend, I should say, from my college basketball days. And one of the notes I found was all of our players on a spreadsheet, and I was the rookie, and how much each person's 1 rep max was for deadlift and for bench and for back squat and all these series of lifts. And I remember thinking at the time, I mean, I was 18 years old. I thought I was the strongest person in the world. Like, I thought there was no one who was stronger than me. And I'm looking back at these numbers. I was the weakest one on the team. I couldn't believe it. But what's shocking to me about that is that we didn't have vertical listed. We didn't have 20-meter dash. We didn't have 10-meter dash. We didn't have a lateral movement assessment. The things that I'm working with a bunch of 8 to 12-year-olds now on rate of force development and on improving their plyos and on generally getting up to a really strong 40-yard dash. We weren't measuring that at university basketball level, and it's crazy. And so you and I worked together, and I got to do some measurements with you, and I just loved it. And I thought it was really, really cool. So you got this background in Olympic lifting, but what's your sport background?
When I was sort of, like college age, more soccer, to be honest. That was kind of my field sport. And then that sort of coming out of organized, in the UK, we don't have as good of a sort of structured kind of sport and especially at university level. So I kind of fell out of things once I graduated. And then that's where I kind of gravitated towards more of the strength training and therefore the Olympic lifting. But what I liked about it is it was more performance based. I like going to the gym. Don't get me wrong. I like lifting weights for the sake of that enjoyment, but the kind of chasing the numbers and chasing the performance and the competitive element of it is something that I really enjoyed. So that, I think that's kind of where I applied that mindset.
What metrics did you have in high school soccer? What did they track? They track anything?
I remember yeah, it's like not strength. Honestly, even I'm 35, and in the UK, even to this day, soccer training, even at the highest level, I've got colleagues who work in soccer. Like, it's slowly changing, but there are certain teams that don't allow their players to do weight training. We're talking about Premier League teams that don't allow players to lift weights.
Interesting.
There's like a misconception that it makes you slow and bulky, and that's rooted in some truth. But then, of course, as you and I know, it's how it's applied and of course how it's measured as well, right? So strength can underpin power if that's applied correctly.
Completely. The only high school soccer team I wasn't on in my small town was the soccer team, so I tried out in grade 12. And the main challenge was this insanely long run. It was like a 3K run, which was long for us at the time, and I won. I won. I crushed it. I beat everyone by so much. I lapped the start, like we were doing it around the pitch. I lapped the strikers.
You're playing the wrong sport,
right? But I was like, I'm going to be on the team. I'm going to be the best player. I got cut. I didn't make it.
Damn. Hey, it's important though,
right? What are we measuring? What are we doing? So we have to measure the right thing. But tell me about this one more aspect of your journey. Like, what inspired you to become a physiotherapist?
Yeah. I didn't want to, go take too long a route, but it kind of, relatively late, I sort of did an undergraduate degree in the UK, was working in a totally different field until I was sort of my mid-20s. And it was when I was really starting to take the strength training and the sort of started with CrossFit, and then it became Olympic lifting, because I, again, kind of liked I like a lot of things about CrossFit. I'm not going to, we don't need to go down that path. But what I liked about Olympic lifting was it was more predictable, it was more measurable, and it was more sort of, easier to track progress. What I liked about CrossFit is you did have certain benchmarks, but it was a bit too broad and difficult to pin down. And so Olympic lifting was that. And so it was kind of the physical endeavor, and then noticing that injuries happened, and both in myself, but also in, people around me, and kind of and I was coaching CrossFit and Olympic lifting at the time. And I thought I would love to be able to, rather than just ship these people off and say, right, go get this fixed and come back to me, kind of try and understand it a bit more myself and take on that role and potentially bridge that gap. And that's eventually, kind of got me down the route. Did my master's in physiotherapy, graduated in 2018, and then moved to Canada in 2020 and have been doing that since. And we just opened our own clinic at Forza Physiotherapy, which is in the same building as one of your locations. So here we are.
Love it. Okay, that's a good journey. Okay, coach first.
And
then physiotherapist. Okay, now correct. I'm getting it. Now I'm getting it. Okay, so you have to tell us about your device. What is the main device that you use? What's it called and what does it measure?
So the one that we did with you, David, I think was the force plate technology. So force plate technology has existed. I don't quote me on this, but it's definitely been around for over a decade, probably a couple of decades at least. But it was very much more limited in, I'd say, probably more the university research realm, and then perhaps adopted in certain sports teams, probably more so in the US, maybe in Australia. And it was used for measuring force. Now, what you might recognize is kind of jump mats, right? Have you ever seen those videos of people doing these big, big, impressive jumps, flying, sort of standing there with their hands on their hips and flying in the air?
Yes.
So those jump mats are probably more common and were more common, and they're a great way to just measure, if done correctly, to measure jump height. And it's a time-based system. So it times the point from which your feet leave to when your feet come back down. And by integrating gravity, you can basically gauge how high someone's jumped from that. Now, there are a few ways to cheat it, but if it's done appropriately, you get a good measure. What the force plates do on top of that is there's two plates rather than one. So now you can see what each leg is doing. Secondly, it's going to tell you much more information about what you're doing throughout the phases of the jump. So from the loading phase, so when you're going down and charging your legs before you jump, right to the very end of your extension, and then also the landing, right? And so for us as physios especially, but I think also in sports, but really with physios, when we look at rehabilitation of patients, we want to really try and see anything that we're missing to the naked eye. And even with jumping, because they're now, like, I was recording jump height with my phone. There's a really good app that can record jump height with your phone, but it doesn't tell you what leg is doing what. And it doesn't tell you what part of the jump you're struggling with. And that gives you a harder time. And I was realizing, I was like, okay, well, we've done this, we've implemented this program. Your jump height hasn't changed, or your jump height's increased, but then you're still having problems with this leg. Why is that? And so that's when I was like, I need more answers, and wanted to go down this route. And luckily now it is more accessible, and the sort of data and online piece of it is becoming better, including sort of some of the normative data sets and guidelines around that.
Okay. What is the company called that makes it?
So the one that we have is by a company called Vald.
Vald, that's right.
VALD, yeah. And they're probably the market leaders in terms of definitely in the physiotherapy space, but they're also, I've definitely seen whether they have official partnerships or they're just sort of integrated, but I've seen them working with professional sports, definitely in the UK, in the US and Australia. They're big in those markets, and there's quite a lot here in Canada as well now. But you don't see it as, it's not as common it's not sort of standard physiotherapy practice at the moment by any means.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
VitaminLab revolutionizes personalized supplements, empowering health practitioners to create tailored supplement formulations that address each patient's unique needs. Bring personalized health to your practice and choose from over 200 professional-grade ingredients to create vitamin formulas that improve patient adherence and result in tangible outcomes. All ingredients are sourced from the world's most trusted suppliers, and VitaminLab provides hands-on support to help you formulate and launch personalization to your patients. Say hello to a new era of personalized supplement solutions. Go to getvitaminlab.com/personalized to save $100 off your first formula.
Physiotherapy and performance. Can you speak about the difference between, let's take that patient as an example.
Yeah.
And maybe highlight in that case what you found from the device. Like, what were you tracking? So you have this unilateral issue. What is the metric you're tracking there? What's it called? And what is the goal with your program?
We definitely can go into the weeds with this, and I don't want to go too far down because it can become esoteric. It can come a little bit too technical. But to try and put it in a more, this is how I'd like to phrase it to a patient. Generally, and this comes through in the data, which is great. We have some good data to show this. Maybe just a little bit of background. So if I'm using the ACL rehabilitation patient, anterior cruciate ligament, back in the day, we just pretty much, and hopefully not anymore, but still sometimes use a time-based approach. So you've injured your ACL, you've had surgery, 3 months down the line, you can start running, 6 months, you can return to sport, crack on.
Yeah.
And it ignores the rehab. We've got better than that. So now the next stage is, okay, you need to be able to do, X amount of squats or lift this amount of weight, and now you're ready to do this. And then the other one, the kind of one that was most common, and I still use it to a degree, think it's still useful, but it's not the only thing, is hop testing. So then it's jumping. How far can you jump on one leg? And then the funny, not the funny thing, but the thing that's also interesting there is your criteria for passing isn't how far you jump. It's how far you jump in comparison to your non-injured side. So if you're 90% or more, that's usually a clearance to return to sport. But what we know in ACLs, post-ACLs, is both legs get weaker, especially if you don't have adequate rehab. So now you're looking at symmetry, but symmetry could be way below what they were before, let alone what they need to be able to do for their sport. And so to go back to what we do, we look now at jump height. So what can you produce? How high can you project yourself from the floor, right? That gives us it's kind of like jumping forward. And to add to that, there is good evidence now that vertical distance is a more accurate representation of knee or quadriceps and knee strength versus horizontal. So jumping forward, that can be quite hip dominant. And so again, that's why we quite like the vertical. Again, I do both, but we want to do both. And the other thing then is what forces are you producing through each leg at different phases there? And there are some really good guidelines. I can share them later and put them in the notes if need be, in terms of relative forces compared to body weight, because that's going to tell us what kind of forces is your knee subjected to when you return to jogging. What kind of sort of forces it's subjected to when you turn to pivoting in a sport. If you're not able to do that on a double leg jump and you're shifting your weight off to the other side, how confident are we that you're going to be able to do that when it comes to going onto the pitch and playing soccer or basketball or whatever, And so that's the kind of thing. And so someone could potentially pass on the criteria of the forward hop test because they got 90%. They could pass on the ability to do a single leg squat for a certain number of reps because they're doing that force, but they're doing it slowly. But when we look at high rates of force development and high rates of especially eccentric force, so slowing yourself down, not only is this where ACL injuries tend to occur, it's also one of the harder things to recuperate in rehabilitation, partly because, in my opinion, physiotherapists don't do enough specific work for that. And secondly, in their defense, patients are very good at masking and using different strategies to avoid using that. And so the force plates don't allow you to hide it because there's nowhere to hide.
Right. Ah, yes. It's I just love talking about this. I'm working with these kids right now and doing this youth speed program, and I'm loving it. And I'm trying to teach them about the rate of force development. I'm trying to teach them about how to increase the amount of force they're applying to the ground, and I'm trying to teach them how to have longer strides.
Nice.
This is the things I'm trying to do. So it's absolutely huge. Now I'm doing my assessments visually, of course. I don't have this objective data. I think that it's so incredibly helpful. But for the audience, I'd love for you to teach them about the rate of force development. What does that term mean to you? And how are you assessing it with your tool?
So rate of force development, let's talk about force. Force is moving, producing a certain amount of force, right? Moving matter, essentially, over a certain amount of time. Rate of force development is how quickly can you get to that level of force in a certain time frame. And so put it in more layman's terms or in a sort of analogy, think about something that would be a high level of peak force would be something like a 1 rep max squat, right? Moving a squat down and up takes about, give or take, 2 seconds, 3 seconds maybe, depending on the range of movement. But you can get to a really high level of force there, so you're a power lifter. The other side of it, a very, very high rate of force, potentially could have a similar level of maximal force, but occurring in a much smaller amount of time, would be a 100-meter sprinter. That drive off the gate, off the starting gate, that initial first step of acceleration, you're producing that force in under 300 milliseconds. And so when we're doing, for example, going back to rehabilitation with ACL injury, we want to make sure that our patients can produce that force first. So we look at something called an isometric knee extension. So we get them to kick into a strap, which is attached to a device called a dynamometer, which registers that force. And so we don't say, hey, kick as fast as you can. We say kick as hard as you can, build up to that. We want to make sure that they're able to actually generate that maximal force. Great. Once we've got that, now we want you to get to that force instantly. And that's what we need. That's the next phase. If you have someone who, and I think a lot of the time with physios, some physios actually skip the first bit. They don't get them to get to that maximal force. They go, right, time to start jumping. And they maybe are really good at producing force quickly, but their maximal force is only down here and it needs to be up there. And that's why, you were doing lifting with your basketball team, and why with these kids, this is why we're telling them to start lifting, because yeah, you can be fast, but if you're not producing a high amount of force, it's like you've got a small engine in the car. You can acceleration is really good, but you're not getting to a high top speed.
Yes, right. Okay. Great point. You're making me rethink kind of the structure around how I'm approaching this. I really like this. So what we're talking about here is actually this phasic approach, right? Having this periodization around rehab. It applies to athletes as well who are not rehabbing, of course, having the solid base. Okay. So how do we train for let's say we have the base, right? We've got the strength. How do we train for an increased rate of force development? So you've got someone pass that isometric test. Now we're moving back to sport, and we need to increase their speed by this second part. What should we do for them? I'm thinking selfishly again, because I really want to help both my patients and these athletes that I'm working with improve their quickness. What do you think is a good strategy there?
So the sort of I'm being attacked by an animal here. The sort of non-specific approach, like if you're doing that with a team, I would definitely take more of a shotgun approach, and also know your population. So if you're working with kids, getting them stronger is a really safe bet. Like unless they're slightly older in high school and they've been lifting in the gym, maybe they don't need as much exposure to that. But often I think the underlying thing that they're going to need the most is strength, because they're probably not, their ability to produce that the higher amounts of force is probably still stunted a little bit. If you're working with an adult population who maybe is has some strength training background but hasn't done as much speed, then we now need to work things that develop that quality, and so things that move lower amounts of weight but faster. And then we could kind of, another sort of sub-classification of that would be reactive strength. So I think you mentioned, so plyometrics, right? The idea of a plyometric is it involves a bounce off the ground, right? A jump doesn't actually mean it's plyometric, because that's your feet start on the ground before you finish, whereas a plyometric involves a hop or a bound, essentially. And so those are more predicated by shorter contact times. Right. So long story short, you want to look at the demands of the activity that they're doing, and you want to create exercises that, or create a program that involves exercises or tasks that super maximally challenge those demands. So take, for example, if you want to improve somebody's ability to create force on a short contact off the ground, I would definitely be implementing things like drop jumps. So starting from a surface, going down to the ground and coming back as high and as fast as possible. If I wanted to improve somebody's acceleration, I might get them to start in a static position and then tell them to explode up or forward, potentially with a bit of overload or potentially just with overspeed. So broad jumps or squat jumps or throws. If somebody has a poor ability to decelerate, so for example, you're finding that they're not really slowing down effectively and changing direction, I would usually involve certain types of things that would overload the eccentric phase. So potentially drop hold. So going from a higher surface and trying to slow yourself down, stop yourself there, or a loaded jump. So going down with weight and then letting go and exploding up, or banded jumps, things like this. So does that make sense? I know that's giving a lot of different exercises, but the good thing about the plates is I have quite a nice battery that I go through to kind of look at those things and see which one is relative to each other, which one needs more work, and I can talk about that more if need be.
I love that. So no, I love those examples. So let's dial in there, because what I'm thinking about is this group of patients that I work with who have trouble catching the bus. It's the getting up.
That's the other group that I see.
Right? Yeah, you've got lots of experience with this.
Yeah, the day-to-day, the everyday athlete.
this population, right? It's the getting up and going from a chair. It's the ability to head down the stairs without falling and getting injured. And I can see the value in this tool now that you've explained it in this way for that population as well. And this is a big piece in longevity. Okay. So like people know about my approach to longevity, that I take fall prevention very seriously. And I feel like because the premise of the show is personalization, I don't feel like we can skip this. It's an important component of probably a lot of the practitioners who watch this is, we're working with these populations of people who really want to have a long, healthy life. And we're constantly talking about strength training. And no one's ever been on a force plate. And so these two pieces, being able to generate that force quickly, the acceleration piece, and then being able to control yourself when times are uncertain, that decel. Let's build that case a little bit. So maybe highlight how we can help someone. Say someone has a solid muscle mass. We're dealing with a lot of people, of course, who have a significant amount of adiposity, and with that, they've challenged their muscles, and those muscles have built over time. The muscles are there, but they can't move them quickly, and then they can't slow them down once they're going. What's the approach? So say it's a 65-year-old male who is non-athletic for the last decade.
Just to kind of piggyback off your point, because I think it's a really good one. We talk about strength training a lot with falls prevention. Strength training is a great proxy, but actually probably the better measure is power training. So producing force quickly, because falls don't happen in 5 seconds. They happen in under a second. And if you trip, you need to catch yourself quickly and produce that force quickly. So actually, yes, strength is great, because if you don't, as we talked before, strength underpins the power. But if we're just always doing slow and heavy lifting, which I love, but if we're only doing that, we're missing out on the benefit of that power. And so that kind of ties into the answer. You lift things quicker, you do things quicker, but you do them, now falls are a multifactorial problem, right? There's balance, vision, dizziness, cognition even. So actually that's the other piece is when we want to train patients, and this includes return to sport, right? ACL injuries or a brain injury. We look at MRIs of patients who've had ACL injuries and they have different brains to when they didn't have the injury, or to patients who haven't had the injury. And so we, as you know, with longevity stuff, how important the cognitive function is and that relationship with physical function, adding those things in there. So to try and bring it back to an answer, it's not going to look that different. It's just going to look more appropriate to that age. So if someone's 1 rep max back squat is 200 kilos and we want to train for speed, we'll do it at 60 kilos. If someone's 1 rep max back squat is 50 kilos and we want to do it for speed, we'll do it at 10 kilos, but we'll do it faster.
Fair. Okay. I like this. This is good. So you're basically saying, pick this certain percentage of their 1 rep max and move the weight quicker.
Give them a time demand. Don't give them a weight demand. Give them a time demand. I want you to throw this ball as far as you can versus I want you to lift this thing as heavy as possible. Or I want you to go this is a physiotherapy test. The timed up and go. It's a great predictor of falls. Get off this chair, go around this cone, come back and sit down. That's a power test. That's a speed test.
That's a rep. That's a rep.
That's one rep. Yeah. And we just gamify that. We make that into training.
Oh, I like that. Okay. So this is true personalization at work. I mean, so I went through your battery of tests, and I was a high level athlete, my friend. I was moving quick. I led the league in minutes played, and you got me doing 1 foot hops, and I realized I need those. I realized I actually do. We all need those. Like, oh my gosh, my ankle stability and my lower leg strength and my abilities to get up off the floor on 1 foot, it diminishes, feels like quickly. I know it's been a long time, but it feels like it's moving. Things are moving very quickly with this deconditioning that happens, even with really high level athletes. I mean, we think about these guys who played hockey when they were young, who still feel like they can do it, and it's not so simple. So I love the strength training piece, and I'm going to integrate that. It's not something that I've done, but I want to be able to say to people, to not say just go do bounds, go do box jumps. How do we slowly build the plyos? What's your approach there?
I think there are tiers, right? I think one of the criteria we look at is the contact time of the plyo. Do we we want to include, this is partly sport dependent and activity dependent. But if you're talking about field sport athletes and team sport athletes, we're going to want to do some short contact plyos, right? So things where you're touching the ground for less than a quarter of a second.
Okay.
We want to ensure that contact time remains at that level, but maximizing the amplitude of the jumping. So what we don't want to do is get them to sacrifice time on the ground for the height of their jump just because they want to, jump higher. That's not training the quality that we want. We want to train, in that sense, we're training reactive strength and tendon stiffness. So for those, depending on their level of exposure to plyometrics, so, have they ever trained before in that way, or how conditioned are they in general? It can range from anything from sort of like skipping, like jumping rope, to doing, really challenging box drop jumps. And to be fair, like we want to, just as with weight training, we don't want to always be maxing out. We also want to have some reps in reserve. So similarly there, contacts, we can talk about contacts per session or contacts per week. So how many jumps you do. Again, depending on their sort of training level, we can sort of vary that. The other nice thing about the jump, the force plates, it does tell us about an athlete's readiness and an athlete's how well they're recovering. And so that can sometimes inform it as well. If we use like a baseline of their counter movement jump, which is hands on hips, jumping down and up, how high are they jumping and how quickly they're jumping tells us, if we're doing it on a regular basis, tells us how ready and how well they're responding to training. Mm-hmm. So some of that. And then for those more, what we call intensive plyos and deeper plyos, so things like in basketball, jumping up, catching a rebound, coming back up, it's not as quick versus a bound to do a layup. Those are quick contacts. And so for that time, you might do a little bit of what we call a depth jump, where you come down, bend your knees lower, and then explode up, spring up like a spring. And that's training. If we're talking about the structures in the skeleton or in the body, those kind of more, those shorter contact ones, those reactive ones, really testing the tendon stiffness. So especially the Achilles, how quickly, how little does it deform before you just rebound up? Whereas the other ones usually are a bit more that muscle kind of stretch and elasticity and then explode.
Okay. It makes sense. This tendon stiffness idea is something that I hadn't learned before the last couple of years, even though I've been in speed sports. I didn't realize.
A lot of the research is relatively new, right? They've been doing a lot more in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah, it's not, because they use ultrasound devices and intratendinous needles, so it's quite intricate.
That's good to hear. I've thought a lot about mobility and proper movement, so proper technique around sprinting and jumping and lateral movements, but haven't thought about the quality of the tissues, with the exception of fast versus slow twitch, too much. But now what I'm wondering, and I think this is a really important thing going forward kind of in this field, and I think my story explains it really well, is how do we prioritize the type of tissue that we want for the person we're working with? You could take any example here. My story is that I trained cross country on the same days that I trained jump training, and did not get the adaptations that I wanted in my jump training at all. Didn't get them. Even though I followed the programs exactly, I did a lot of the things you're recommending for me, I've done before, but I ran for hours on the same day. And I think it limited the structural change. I didn't realize about tendon stiffness. I didn't realize enough about fast twitch muscle development. So can you talk to us a little bit about sets and reps and volume and frequency of training, and how those adaptations actually occur? How do we promote the adaptation that we actually want?
It's going to come down to a degree, as we said, to task and function that we're looking for. But I wanted to just pick up on a point you made about your kind of focus on mechanics. Is that what you were saying? Like, I focused on mechanics and mobility. Now, and you said I didn't focus on tissue quality. I actually think, because there's quite a big rift in physiotherapy, at least, about physios who are very driven by biomechanics. Okay, if you don't squat like this or you don't run like this, that's wrong.
That's how I learned. That's everything.
Yeah. And I don't want to be hypercritical of that, because I think there's an element of truth there. Because in my opinion, the tissue mechanics can actually predicate the biomechanics, or the tissue qualities can predicate. So like, for example, take sprinting. Having that sort of nice full extension through the hip, really good push up through the ankle, not having a sort of slow contact on the ground, not being sluggish, being attacking the ground. What predicates that? Tissue quality. If you don't have the ability to produce that force, and you don't have the tendon stiffness to resist that force, you're gonna have bad sprint technique. It's simple as that. So the two are together.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point.
And same in my sport of Olympic lifting, the goal is, all right, keep your chest up. Don't round your shoulders when you're lifting the bar off the floor. Sure, if your back is weak as piss, you're gonna, sorry, pardon my language, but if your back is really weak, you're not gonna be able to keep your chest up. So have a strong back. Yeah. You'll be fine. Yeah,
for sure. There's certain qualities that are essential. Yeah. You bring up a really excellent point. And I've been thinking about this recently as well, because I've been comparing these couple examples, right? In sprinting, we've got Andre De Grasse in Canada, who's small and lean, but his ability to generate force is insanely fast. But he does have this tendon quality. He has this strength through the tendons that's incredible. But when you compare him to the other 100 and 200 meter sprinters, he's so tiny, and he's right up there with them. But the tendon quality, the strength in the lower leg is got to be on par. So he has that base. And we see it in basketball, we see it too, right? Like, I grew up with Reggie Miller, with kind of the worst form in the history of jump shots and one of the best 3-point shots of the 90s. And I thought it was ridiculous. And I couldn't believe it. And so I tried to have absolute perfect mechanics, and it didn't serve me as well as I would have thought of. But the neurologic connection between his eyes and that rim, his ability to lock in on the rim, and for his nervous system to tell his hands where to put that ball, might have mattered. It mattered more than the mechanics. So very interesting point. But there's other aspects like tendon quality. And you were going to say something there about my Andre De Grasse example.
Yeah, I need to find it. I'll send it again. I can send it to you later. I saw a really excellent excerpt on a video. It must have been 10 years ago, 10 years old or so. But they did actually do a study on I can't remember his name, but I recognize him. You probably would recognize him. He was a gold medalist high jumper, I think Swedish.
Okay.
Again, similar kind of build. Doesn't look that big. Absolutely insane hops. And his tendon stiffness was about 4 times the sort of average that they tested. And so, yeah, that tissue quality, genetic freak, of course, but at the same time, you have to train that.
And we can train it. Is the point.
That's it. To that point, there are ways to train tendon stiffness. Now, I'm never going to have the tendon stiffness of Andre De Grasse, or I'm never going to have the tendon stiffness of a high jumper, but I can definitely improve it on myself. And even then, so when I look at things like ground contact time, like hopping, if someone is really sluggish off the floor, as in they're spending too long on the ground and then coming back up, I want to train the tendon stiffness. But you know what? As to your point about Reggie Miller, it's also the central nervous system, the CNS. It's sending that neuromuscular, that signal to the neuromuscular unit to produce that force instantaneously. And so we might actually do the opposite and take weight away from them. So do things like banded pogos that they're assisted to be quick and get that feeling of that elastic explosiveness. Because sometimes, and this is something, with my Achilles rupture patients, that's something that I love to do in that later stage, where I know they don't have the tendon qualities yet, because I can see their tendon is still thick, it's still not there, but I can at least train their neuromuscular system to start learning that, and it's still safe for them. So that's a nice kind of dovetail into that.
Yeah, great point. This connection between the nervous system and these tissues has to be built as well. But I wanted to get just one thing down, because I've been playing around with this for years when it comes to physiologic adaptation. Is it 2 times a week? Is it 3 times a week? Is it whenever you recover? How many times per week should we be training these different systems? What do you think?
There are guidelines, partly to do with central nervous system and partly to do with the actual local tissue. I adopt more of a high-low training periodization versus strength on one day, or definitely not body group. So I don't do arms, legs, back, chest kind of split. It's a high-low. So we could be doing plyometrics 5 times a week, but on the Monday, we might be doing what we call extensive plyometrics. So we're doing double leg pogo hops for 20 seconds at a nice light tempo. We're just doing it for rhythm and to keep that central nervous system fresh and fast. Then the next day, we might be doing drop jumps, 3 sets of 5, attacking that ground, being powerful, getting as high as possible. And then the next day we might do more of a sort of muscular style plyometric. Like I really like split jumps where we can kind of load down into a position, explode up, spring, and then load down, spring back up. Then the intensity, the more intense plyometrics like the drop jumps, I keep the number of contacts lower. So per week, I'm probably not doing more than 30 contacts of a high intensity. And that's someone who's more trained. If you're less trained, it might be 10 to 15.
Completely.
Extensive, we can go up to 100, 120, 150 if it's, especially a more trained individual. And then those kind of muscular ones, somewhere in between 30 to 50 is probably where I'm at. And yeah, I try to, ideally I try not to lump them all in on the same day. Not so much from a fatigue aspect, more from a benefit of the training. If we can, I'd rather do 3 really good sets than 6 mediocre sets. And do 3 really good sets twice per week than 6 okay sets once per week. But hey, life sometimes, and you gotta work with it.
But dude, that's the best answer. I just love that answer because it's in line with my beliefs.
Okay, nice. Right? Okay, I confirm the biases. Yeah,
I love it.
And I'm open. I'm open to like, this is just based on experts that I follow in the field. Based on, look, we don't have the best data on this, to be honest with you, right? Like, sports science data is science with small s's. It's like we want to do our best, but it changes.
You can blast every day. And certain people will get incredible gains from that. Or not every day. You can blast once a week and get incredible gains from that. Some people, it's amazing. They only need to train once a week. They train super hard. They get incredible gains. But I think most people, to your main point here, need to train every day a little bit. We need to keep sending the signal a lot of times per week. You're saying like 5 times, but only a few sets per day.
Yeah, like I'm not advocating that everyone gets off the couch now who's never trained and goes and does plyometrics 5 times per week. But I'm saying if you're going to do them and you're already doing, because look, running is a plyometric activity.
Yes, it is.
Sport is a plyometric activity. So we're just talking about ways to prepare you for that. And if you can recover effectively and do it in a way, it should complement those things, not be a detriment. I mean, we look at, it's great now in the age of social media and the internet. Like, we know we've got a sort of loophole into professional sports. And I see now through some of the accounts that I'm following, some of the strength coaches I'm following, I look at what professional teams are doing. They're doing plyometrics the day before a game. They're just doing it at an intensity right down here.
Wow.
Right down here. And it's speed, freshness, preparation, mental, and go.
Love that. That's really cool.
When we do bike work like I'm doing now, right, I'm trying to improve my VO2 max. We can talk about that another time. But I go at zone 2, 30 minutes. I feel great afterwards. So I'm still doing cardio, but I feel amazing, right? And you can do the same with plyometrics.
After you're well trained, you should be recovered within 12 hours. You should be good to go. It's too much if you're not recovering by the next day anyways, I think in that setting.
And we do know, there is, I don't want to completely throw everything under the bus. Like there is some, like the tendon data is quite good. I think if you look at tendons after like maximal plyometrics, it does take upwards of 48 hours to recover. But those are maximal.
Yeah, you shouldn't be max sprinting every day.
No, definitely not. And
yeah, not max sprinting every day. Not most likely for most people, but you can have some stimulus. And
it's tough with sports because, especially like you probably see it with your youth athletes, right? They're practicing 3 times a week, playing twice a week. When are you going to train? Right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's really difficult for them.
And so you're just trying to shoehorn it. That's a big challenge. That's something else there. But even like I heard a really good podcast with Ranzi Najim. He's a strength coach at, I think he was with I think the Kings, Sacramento Kings, and now he's in college, and he was talking about the difference. But he's talking about they'll go in the gym and do maybe 2 or 3 sets for 3 reps of like a trap bar deadlift just to get some load, some stimulus, and with minimal fatigue, right? And that can be enough of a stimulus on a day. And this is a guy who's been doing this, decades.
I want to see what the Major League Baseball players are doing because I noticed that
a lot of drugs.
That too. They play so many matches. They play every day, 6 days a week for like 6 or 7 months. It's
true,
so much work.
Their volume is high.
They lose a lot of size. By the end of the season, they lose so much size. It's really difficult, I'm sure, to train in a way and still compete. But I wanted to piggyback on this whole conversation. What are some of the mistakes that you see in your programming, your rehab programming that people make? Is it too much volume? Is it too much intensity too quickly? Is it people just not following your plans? Like, what do you see here as the biggest mistakes?
I think the obvious and well, apart from the obvious one that they're not doing enough of it, right? That's probably the most obvious one is unless you're an athlete, most people aren't sprinting or jumping, right? Like most people in the gym. And that's fair, I get it. But like, I think it should become, how cardio has almost become a thing, and understandably so. It's good for your heart. It's good for your metabolic system, good for your metabolic function, all those things. I think there should be a sort of basic amount of plyometrics, whether that's, or ballistics to be precise, so not necessarily hops, but we could be doing jumps to a box.
Completely.
We should be doing some of it. So one, it's not being done enough. Two, yeah, I mean, to put it simply, it's the dosing is wrong. Usually, probably, and this would be a subset. This is actually definitely one. Now I'm thinking of it. The circuit class jump, and this is one of the issues I did have with CrossFit, was using things like box jumps, even Olympic lifting, which is not plyometric, but it is power training, under a huge amount of fatigue.
Yeah.
Now, let's put safety aside, but just from a pure adaptation standpoint, that's totally counterintuitive and totally counterproductive. Like I said, we want, especially with those more challenging plyometrics, we want to be keeping the volume pretty low, because once we start getting above a certain amount, the fatigue kicks in and we don't produce the force that we want. And then injury-wise, it does leave us a bit more vulnerable to potentially overdoing something that we're not recovered enough to be able to do. I was having a conversation with a trainer in the gym the other day, actually, and he was criticizing CrossFit for that reason. And I said, look, I don't have an issue with the sport of CrossFit doing that. If they want to do if you want to be a CrossFit athlete and do 30 snatches for time or 100 box jumps for time, go for it. But that's a sport. And he goes, well, that's silly. You're going to get injured. He's like that, but you're doing it under fatigue. I'm like, sport is doing stuff under fatigue. Like when you're playing soccer and you got to sprint back and tackle your defender, you're doing it under fatigue. So in that sense, it's fine, but you wouldn't want to do that for health and longevity.
And you don't necessarily want to do that in the training for that sport.
No, good point.
One of the biggest controversies was that the number one CrossFitter did not do CrossFit.
No, CrossFitters don't train like CrossFitters. They do a load of bike. They do a load of strength training, and they do some skill work. And they do maybe 1 or 2 WODs per week. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I love CrossFit. Don't get me wrong.
Same with, if you're a sprinter, how many times does Andre DeGrasse do 100 meters in his training? Very rarely. He's sprinting 20s. He's running 400s. He's doing everything around it without having to, maybe every now and then test it. But you don't need to do it every day.
Exactly. And I love CrossFit, and I love High Rocks, and I love the circuit classes. I love Orange Theory. I love F45. I love these things. When I do my assessments, my main suggestion to people is to get more rest, to continue the movements, to continue showing up, to continue integrating cardio and strength in the same session on the same day. It's absolutely fair to do that for longevity purposes. But get adequate rest if you're going to be zone 4, zone 5. And what I've been teaching my kids who are doing my speed program is we're walking between sets. We're bringing our heart rate down. We're getting recovered. We're trying to have really good quality reps. And I want them to take that with them. And for the audience listening, like to Marcel's point here, like we do need to be doing more jumping and splitting and sprinting as a population. And what you should know about it is it's kind of fun. It's fun, right? Like it's not, if you're thinking about our discussion, you're thinking about sport, the coaches weren't really doing it right. We were getting destroyed every practice 4 nights a week and then expected to compete every weekend. The soccer guys were getting destroyed with endurance, even though they don't really do much of that. They have to have a base, but it's quick to the ball. Let's face it. And the basketball guys, we were just getting destroyed with high intensity work every single day.
Just sprints up and back, up and back. Which again, we've said if you're not resting adequately in between, you're not getting that adaptation. We're talking about 10 seconds of activity. That's you took the words out of my mouth. More rest is another huge one. I think that comes down to what I was saying about it. So for every 10 meters of sprint, have a minute of rest.
I like that. Yep.
If you're doing a 10 meter sprint, rest a minute. If you're doing 20-minute sprint, rest 2 minutes. If you're doing a 50-minute sprint, 5 minutes rest. Yes, 5 minutes. because that's you've absolutely emptied your tank. If you've done it maximally, you've absolutely emptied your tank and you need that rest.
I love that. I know you're taking a lot of that from your powerlifting career. I know that that's very common in your sport.
True. Olympic lifting as well. 1 rep and then you rest.
Olympic lifting, exactly.
No, they're cousins. They're cousins.
No, fair. My apologies.
No, you're good.
It's so important. And as I reflect back on my younger days, the guys who could dunk, they weren't in cross country. they weren't winning our runs. The fastest people on the team, our number one sprinter only played baseball, and he was a goalie in hockey. Like this overdoing it for youth athletes. I want kids to play multi-sport, but I don't want kids to be destroying and not recovering, I guess we should say.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in our rehab programs, right? We have to be mindful.
And with that, and with the kind of circuit group, like I'm with you. I'm not anti-circuits. I think, Orange Theory, F45. Now, I have my issues with certain aspects of it in terms of, essentially, it's more what they claim, right? If they're claiming that that's strength training, I'm sorry, I don't agree. It's not strength training unless you've never picked up a single weight in your life. But if you've done more than a month of strength training, that's not going to get you stronger. Right. It's going to get you fitter, and that's okay. It's going to get you sweating. It's going to burn calories. Mm-hmm. Just like doing box jumps for 45 seconds flat isn't going to make you jump higher.
Right.
It's going to make you tired.
Yeah, good point. Really good point.
And so, like to your point, rest more, jump less, rest more.
And if you haven't done this before, expect newbie gains. Newbie gains are the best.
Yeah, we love
right.
them.
So let's just reflect on that rehab piece and about what is it like in the initial stages. What are the newbie gains like for someone, say, for example, who's not necessarily not returned to sport? I'm talking about someone who hasn't done this, who has some imbalance. To your first, to your case, we've got an imbalance. We're developing a program. What are the expectations for improvements using the tool that you have? How long does it take?
To a degree, right? It's dependent on the tissue that we're looking to change. Tendons are going to take longer. Okay. Muscles are going to take less time. And the quickest adaptation is going to be a neural adaptation. So very similar to strength, because in a sense, we are still talking about strength training, right? We're just talking about higher rates of strength, higher speed of developing that strength or producing that force. Because, yeah, that's a whole other debate. What is strength? So the expectations then, if somebody is showing that they have more of a muscular deficit, so perhaps when they do something, not to get too complicated with the movement, but when they're bending their knees and preparing to jump, they're really struggling to slow themselves down. They're kind of almost doing it in 2 phases. They're going down, they're stopping at the bottom, then they're coming back up. That to me tells me they have a muscular deficit. Their quads aren't good enough at stretching and then contracting again. So we're going to try and develop that quality partly by jumping, but like we said before, we want to do other things. So we might be doing some squats, some fast squats. I would expect there, with somebody who has zero experience jumping, they're going to adapt very quickly because, like you said, newbie gains. The law of diminishing returns, if they've jumped before, it's going to be a bit slower. But if they've never jumped before, I would expect there to be a significant change. We're talking 10 to 15% improvement within 3 to 4 weeks, no doubt.
Love that.
In somebody who has more, does jump, let's say, I see this quite a lot in sports. Like we do work quite a lot with field hockey, and they do a lot of running and some sort of jumping, but they don't really train their muscles. They don't really strength train. And so they need to develop that strength and more specific strength to that. That can be more in the sort of 8 to 12 weeks to see a bigger change, because we're looking at improvements in cross-sectional area. We're looking at the ability, sort of that sarcomere density as well. So like not just they have more hypertrophy of the muscle, is that muscle more densely packed and producing force quickly? Mm-hmm. And then there's still the neural drive. There's still the ability for that motor unit to fire at a high rate. And those things kind of come together nicely in that time. So I think that's kind of the time scale. Now, tendons can take longer. Tendons can be 3 to 6 months to really see those changes. But we generally, the good thing about training the tendon, you do get some muscular training as well. And so they're going to see some of the improvements from that too.
Oh, love it. Okay. That's really well laid out. What I want to do in our next episode, just to kind of tease it, because I want you to come back.
Yeah, dude, I'd love to.
I think that we have so much more to talk about. I'd love to talk about all the other metrics that you're evaluating through your device and go into them into detail, but I'd also love to go through some specifics for each of these type of programs. So we'll cover that in the next episode. For people who are listening, who are interested in working with Marcel or learning more about him, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a clinic with my clinic partner, my business partner Justin. We are called Forza Physiotherapy, Forza, based out here in Vancouver downtown, working in the Evolve gym space. So we have kind of our own clinical room, which is actually another great reason for the force plates. We can do the testing in a small clinical space, gives us a lot of information that we'd otherwise have to do in the gym. So we do our testing in there, and then the good thing is we have a gym on our doorstep with a nice sort of 90-foot turf as well that we can use, and lots and lots of weights. So both of those things there. So physiotherapy, and we also have massage therapy, so kind of that recovery piece and making sure that everything's ready to go game day and between training. We want to kind of have that full spectrum. So yeah,
love it. And what's your Instagram handle?
We're Forza Physiotherapy, just simple at Forza Physiotherapy altogether. Perfect.
Well, very nice chatting with you, sir. Thanks so much. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about. I really appreciate your time, and we'll have you on again. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll come back.
Loved it. I would love to, David. That'd be great. Appreciate the time.
Sounds good. Thanks again. Okay, we'll talk soon, Marcel.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us for today's discussion. What about today's podcast resonated with you? Be sure to tag at Dr. David Duizer and at Get VitaminLab. If you're learning from and enjoying this podcast, please let us know by subscribing to our YouTube channel and follow the show on Spotify and Apple. And don't forget to leave us a review. It's the best way to support our podcast, and it helps others find us. To learn more or book a demo to explore what personalization could do for your practice, please go to www.getvitaminlab.com/personalized.